Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. Today I'm honored to have Joe Alexander with me. Joe is a former NBA top 10 pick and a 15-year professional basketball player. And one of the things I think you're going to hear about his journey is how every opportunity presents itself at the right time. And so, Joe, thanks so much for being on today.
It's really my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So to start your story, you were born in Taiwan, moved to the States for a little bit, but then really grew up in China. So talk a little bit about being, a young person and growing up in really, a new culture to you periodically.
Sure. Most important is I grew up as an alien, totally estranged from American culture.
Yeah.
By the time I made it back to the States, I didn't know anything about anything that anyone had to discuss, and basketball included. So I really landed from outer space after living in China. Um, but while I was living there, that's all I knew. So I thought that it was normal.
Yeah. Now, as you're growing up there, you have two older brothers, and they grew a knack for basketball, and I'm sure as it goes, you guys would play and be competitive against each other. But the style of basketball that you learned playing in China was much more in the one-on-one sense rather than in the five-on-five. So talk a little about early on with basketball and maybe some sibling rivalries or competitiveness that might have happened there.
Sure. I tell kids that I cheated my way to the NBA because everyone in America was going through the AAU circuit and trying to learn 5-on-5. And I had played 1-on-1 my whole life. I didn't have a choice because I didn't have people to play with and I didn't have leagues to play in. So by the time I was entering the NBA draft, I think I had played more 1-on-1 than anybody in the
Yeah.
maybe twice as much as the number two person. It's all that I did growing up was play 1-on-1. And when I wasn't playing 1-on-1, I was playing all by myself.
Yeah.
So, and the process to get drafted, as you may or may not know, is just get in the gym with other draft picks and play 1-on-1.
Right.
So everyone was toast once that moment came. Um, so being in China really gave me a unique leg up from that aspect of things. Style wise, I don't think I had a 5-on-5 style except not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that was the downside of it, that I didn't learn 5-on-5. So,
Absolutely. Now, as you grew up and you hit the teenage years, you end up moving to the United States. And to your point, you're starting to play high school five-on-five basketball. And just talk a little bit about that because as you end up deciding to go play at West Virginia, it wasn't as if you had all of these Division I offers your junior and senior year of high school. You really had to kind of navigate the water. So talk a little about, that developmental, couple of years and then how you end up picking West Virginia.
so I knew since I was 12, my only goal in basketball is get in the gym with the best players that I possibly can, even if I'm the worst player when I start, because I knew I could outwork everybody and that it would just be a matter of time before I was the best one there. So
Yeah.
it was a matter of getting my foot in the door. And when it came time to pick a college, West Virginia was the best college that offered me. So it was a no-brainer. I said, I got to go there. And I knew once I signed, I knew everyone was dead. I said, you guys got a maximum of 4 years from better than all of you. Other than West Virginia, it was just a couple of mid-majors that offered me. So I got lucky. John Beeline came and fell in love with me. He thought I was a three-point shooter. He showed up on a day of workouts where I was knocking out threes, and that was his thing. So he had me slated to replace Tyrone Sally, who was a big-time three-point shooter. And John Beeline he was one of the best coaches in the country, showing me film,
Yeah.
telling me, "Hey, you're going to replace this guy. You're going to be here in the corner shooting the three." And I was like, "Oh, okay." No, and I don't shoot threes, bro. I'm not even a good shooter. So, but I went along with it. I was like, yeah, no problem. I can do that. So that's and then yeah, that's how that went. So
Now, when you get there, West Virginia was a nice team, and you're playing with guys like Kevin Pittsnogle, who, got some notoriety on the national scene. So talk a little bit about, changing, maybe not even changing, but getting integrated into a new style of basketball and having to really learn that style and adapt to it, where it's less about your ability to play one-on-one and more kind of how it fit within the team culture.
sure. So I didn't learn. I didn't adapt. I didn't participate in John Beeline's style at all. I never got to play with Kevin Pittsnoggle or Mike Gansey or those guys because I was too stupid. I came in as a freshman with a lot of people thinking that I might go to the NBA after that year. Our assistant coaches were telling me that, but they saw once we started playing 5-on-5 that I didn't know how to play basketball. And I not only didn't know how to play, but I didn't know that I didn't know how to play. It took me like 2 years until I realized basketball is not one-on-one,
Hmm.
and it's not an athletic track meet. So I did not learn John Beilein's system at all.
Now, you did end up having some success with John Beilein's team and win the NIT championship. So, talk a little about that progression, even for you, and maybe even stepping into a bigger role that second year after the freshman year.
Sure. So I was talented. I was athletic. I was tall. I was a good player. I drove my coaches nuts, not knowing plays and not integrating into the system. But I was talented. I was good. I was skilled. I worked hard. I played hard. I played defense. So I was a starter on the team. We won the NIT tournament. We were a great team. Uh, Darius Nichols hit a game-winning shot at Madison Square Garden to win the NIT. I thought we should have been in the NCAA tournament that year, but we were a great team. We had Deshaun Butler, who, if he didn't get hurt, would have been an NBA lottery pick. Joe Mazzulla was on that team.
Yeah,
Man, we had a great team. So my role stepping into that my sophomore season was, I was a mature kid. So despite my shortcomings on the court, X's and O's wise, I was still, I thought, like a good mature presence, a guy who competed every day in practice and in games. So that was sort of my role. Whether I was lost in X, even though I was lost in X's and O's, I was still there as far as bringing the competitive side of things. So that was good.
absolutely. Now, just kind of thinking about that end of that year, you guys are gaining momentum, and then there's a head coach shift, right? Beeline leaves, and Bob Huggins comes in, who once again is another great coach. But it's hard to, get acclimated to a new system. So, talk a little bit about the transition there, for you, but also for the team dynamic.
Well, that was just a big like world shifting. The transition was. I can't speak too much for the other guys. I know it was huge for everybody. For me, it was so mm, it was so crazy because Bob Huggins believed in me so much from the beginning,
Yeah.
and I didn't know it, but I was his style of player. If he could go have recruited his guy, it would have been me. So I just got so lucky, and I didn't understand why he had put his arm around me on day one and said, "You're my guy,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get you to the NBA. If you just get done what you need to get done in the weight room, I'm going to take you to the NBA." I didn't know why he loved me so much. Now, in retrospect, I understand it perfectly well. So the transition for me was about putting my trust in him. And that took a really long time because I didn't trust anybody at the time.
Mm.
Part of being a one-on-one player comes from being a isolated individual all around, not being a part of a team, not integrating with teams or working with teams, and generally distrusting everybody.
Mm.
And that was the way I interacted with John Beilein and his staff. So when Bob Huggins came and loved me, it took me a while to just listen to him and trust him. Um, and besides that, it was a big transition from a physical standpoint. I had to gain a lot of weight. I went from being a perimeter slasher, fake 3-point shooter, to being a true 4 or 5 man pivot player, which I'd never been before. And Huggins brought me through that transition in 6 months, which is pretty remarkable. So,
Very remarkable.
yep.
Now, talking a little bit about that, I want to dive into whether it's, certain events that happened in your life that made you feel like a solo or an isolated person, and then being willing to open up to, somebody that is looking after you, taking care of you, and, wants to see you succeed. Talk a little bit about that transformation for you, because I think for a lot of people, someone listening right now isn't saying, "Oh yeah, I remember my college basketball days," but they're like, "I feel that way about my significant other. I feel that way about my work environment, that gosh, I've kind of always had to do things my own and I don't just naturally trust people, but maybe giving that extra trust to somebody is kind of the breakthrough project for them."
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's about timing because if you start to trust people too early, it's a big mistake. And I was deliberately skeptical of everybody in my life because I learned early on that people steal your energy. And
Mm.
for a player like me who was not good not tall, not heralded, not ranked, not athletic, not a prospect. Anybody I interacted with in the basketball world would just steal my energy. And what I mean is, I was trying to go to the NBA and nothing else, and
Yeah.
not a soul on the planet was vibing with me. And when people aren't vibing with you, you pick it up in every kind of subtle way. So the best thing you can do is just stay away from everybody.
Mm.
So, and I was working so unbelievably hard that anything that contaminated my energy was a threat to my daily work regimen. And I couldn't risk that. I couldn't risk a single hour of lost work, a single day for 10 straight years. So I isolated by necessity, and it was the right thing to do. So even though it had its drawbacks, it got me where I needed to get, which was to a point where I attracted somebody
Yeah.
like Bob Huggins, who could empower me if I made the shift from isolation to integration. And that's what I did. Well, it took some time, like I said, but that's what happened. Suddenly, people were attracted to me who could actually help me instead of steal my energy. And I had to recognize that and make that adjustment and say, okay, now you're in my tribe, you're in my group. It's no longer me, it's now me and you. And that's
Love
what
it.
happened. Yeah.
I love it. Now, in that year, you guys make the NCAA tournament, make a Sweet 16 run. So talk a little bit about that fun year, some of the, I don't know, I guess you could call them an upset, but some of the big games that you played in and fun wins that you had.
Got to be Duke was our one of our most fun games.
Yeah.
Um, Not because we won. It was most fun because nobody except our team will ever understand the arrogance and energy that we had coming into shoot arounds, coming into film sessions, coming into practice every day. We felt that nobody could beat us. We had a combination of Deshaun Butler, like I said, was an NBA lottery pick.
Yep.
Without injuries, he would have played a decade plus in the NBA. He would have been a multi-year All-Star. We had Joe Mazzulla. We didn't know at the time that he was Joe Mazzulla.
Right.
We just had we had such a dynamic group of guys that were so confident, and that confidence was what I enjoyed the most. So going into games like against Duke, where the press was asking us how we feel and how we're going to, make adjustment, we didn't care. We knew we were going to beat everybody. We didn't
Yeah.
care about it. So that's what I liked the most. And that wasn't just with Duke. That was with everybody. That was with Pitt. That was with UConn. That was with St. John's. All the biggest teams in the Big East. Villanova. We just went in with our balls swinging. We were ready to roll.
I love it. Now, within that, and I think, this is something I'd just be curious about. Do you feel like a lot of confidence was gained by people knowing their role and starring in their role? Or what do you think it was about that team and those individuals that really brought that confidence together?
Sure. It was the culture built by Bob Huggins, Larry Harrison, Billy Hahn, Eric Martin, and Jared Calhoun. So that was our coaching staff.
Yeah.
And I went from John Beilein's staff to the new coaching staff, and I couldn't believe the change in vibe.
Yeah.
So I can't really explain it to you or your audience, but I mean, these guys were MFers. Um, they were grown men mentality, and they didn't want to hear about X's and O's. They wanted us to put our head down and run through people.
Yeah.
Um, they were just a different breed, and it started there, and then us as players, we took to it. It just blew up.
I love it. So, as you have a great season, individually and as a team, you then decide, hey, I'm going to enter the NBA draft, and that 2008 draft is a very strong draft class, and you end up going eighth overall, and you alluded to it earlier. Climbed through, the draft order, probably a lot to do with how you played one-on-one at workouts. So talk a little bit about that whole process and really how you ended up in the eighth overall spot to the Bucks.
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, that was such a great draft. Not only like talented guys, but guys that had longevity. There's
Yeah.
guys from that draft that are still playing and still killing. I mean, I love to see it. I love to see Wes still playing, and D Rose, and just like they've had magical careers. So
Yeah.
it was a special draft class. For me, the draft process, I didn't even know I was going to get drafted. And I started on the phone with Jerry West, with him telling me, bro, go back to school. Like, you're a second round pick. Let Huggins teach you for another season. And then I went to like 2 or 3 draft workouts and I murdered everybody.
Yeah.
And every team said, "Stop working out. We want to stash you. We're going to take you." And these were lottery teams.
Yeah.
And every team I worked out for, the higher and higher and up it was, they all said the same thing. So then Jerry told me, "All right, man, you're going top 10, so you can't go back to school." And that's sort of how it went. Like I said, the workouts themselves were one-on-one workouts,
Yeah.
and it was a it was a joke, really. I mean, that's really what it was. So
So as you get drafted, I think one of the tough balancing acts of, especially at that level of basketball, is, your a goal for a lot of people is to get drafted. And then it's like, but now you're on the team. So now you got to work hard, right, to get your spot on the team and to to earn minutes.
yep.
Talk a little bit about, coming into the NBA then. And, if I recall correctly, like Michael Redd would have still been with the Bucks, and, you've got a strong a group of guys that you can learn from. But talk about just getting integrated into the NBA and being the young guy and learning the new system.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great group of guys. Richard Jefferson was amazing for me. He was such a good veteran and friend. Michael was more quiet. We had hilarious guys like Tyronn Lue and Damon Jones, Keith Bogans. We
Yeah.
had a fun group of guys. Charlie Bell and Luke Ridnour. I was enjoying myself, like getting to know NBA players and becoming friends and peers with them. So that was a good time. But as far as like me on the court and getting into the system, I struggled just like I did in college, just like I did in high school. I've always had a very tough time going to a new system, a new league, and learning everything.
Yeah.
So I had a really tough time learning and a very slow start. So I was very frustrated for my first season, and the Bucks were frustrated with me too. But I mean, I didn't care because I knew myself. I knew it takes me a year or two, three. I took it the same way that I took college. I said, I'm going to get in my foot in the door with the best players I can. And it's
Yeah.
just a matter of time before I'm better than everybody. I knew it was going to take me 3, 4, 5 years. I knew I was going to be better than everybody because I would outwork everybody. But I mean, with the Bucks, I was gone in 12 months, so that didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it from the start.
Now, something that you've mentioned a couple of times, I know is super important in your story, is just that work ethic and just that belief in yourself that, hey, if I can just get enough time or if I can just get around the right people, I can outwork my way into the spot. Where did that stem from, or where does that come from for you?
Well, it comes from two places. Number one is my dad. My dad is a workhorse. He's a generous workhorse. I was just saying this about him earlier to my best friend. I was saying, if my dad does a work project with you, he's going to do 90% of the work and take 0% of the credit and do the whole thing with a smile on his face and never complain one time.
Wow.
So I took all that from my dad. He used to tell me, people who complain about work, it's the same thing as not working at all. So, and he used to tell me, you have to outwork every single man alive every single day,
Yeah.
every day, no days off. And so that's what I did. So number one was him, and number two was I grew up in China, and there's no comparison between work ethic in America versus work ethic in China.
Yeah.
And in China, you don't take days off, you don't take holidays off, and I didn't. From the time I started going to the NBA, I never took a day off. I
Yeah.
never took a holiday off. If it was snowing outside, if I was sick, if I was dead, whatever it was, I never took a day off. So, yeah.
Love it. Now, after being with the Bucks, you end up with the Bulls, and once again, getting integrated into a new system. Talk a little bit about your time there and in that season.
Sure. I wasn't really taken on at the Bulls with any level of seriousness by them. It was an expiring contract that they wanted to pick up. By the time I left the Bucks, I was written off in the NBA as a bust. I was badmouthed all over the league as somebody who couldn't learn, had a learning disability, wasn't a team player, didn't have any upside, and just wasn't a good, couldn't play in the NBA. So, and the Bucks had a vested interest in making sure that that reputation followed me around, because if it didn't and I panned out somewhere else, it looks very bad for them.
Right.
So that was the scoop on me. It remained the scoop on me. And when I went to the Bulls, it was a situation of playing out the last 12 weeks of my contract. That was it.
Got it. Now, from there, you end up playing in the G League for some time. and, really kind of growing a reputation there, but you end up having an injury. And talk a little bit about that.
Well, no disrespect, but I don't talk about injuries. I've been injured like anybody else. Everyone gets injured. My time in the G League, injuries didn't affect me any more than they affected anybody else.
Yeah.
Um, my my time in the G League, like you said, was a time of growth. And to be honest, it was my favorite time in my basketball life. I loved my time in the G League. We didn't get paid anything. We wore sweats all day. I felt like I was back in college. I loved my teammates because half of them, half of them had given up on their NBA dream, and half of them were hungrier than all the NBA players.
Right.
And I don't know, there's something about that dichotomy I just loved. I loved going into practice and beating the hell out of both of those swaths of guys.
Yeah.
I just loved the G League, and I had a great time there. I was an all star. I thought I was the best power forward in the G League for 3 straight years. It was broken up, but for 3 years that I was there,
Yeah.
and I thought that I should have been back in the NBA. So I really enjoyed myself, and I grew a little bit as a player, not much, but a little bit. So.
Yeah. Well, and so as you're, progressing through the G League and your ultimate desire, I'm sure, was to get back into the NBA, your agent calls you and has an opportunity that has nothing to do with the NBA. It has to do with going overseas, and you're originally not so sold on it. So talk a little bit about, the whole phone call that comes through, and then being willing to pivot and head overseas.
So, we talked a bit about letting other people affect your energy. And
Yeah.
in a moment of weakness, if you let the wrong people whisper in your ear, you could derail your whole life.
Yeah.
Now, that can also work in a positive way as well. But for me, my goal has always been to go to the NBA. And like I said, I never listened to anybody when they said anything to the contrary. But this was a moment where I let people whisper in my ear. It's nobody's fault but my own. And they told me, look, this is Maccabi Tel Aviv. It's one of the powerhouses of Europe, and you cannot say no to them. You don't have a choice. You have to go if they offer you. And obviously, I could have said no, but my agent told me nobody in the NBA is interested in you. I was, in my opinion, the number one power forward in the G League at the time. He told me no one in the NBA even has you on their board of like 20 guys who they might want to take. And I was very angry when he told me that, and I trusted him, which I shouldn't have. I should have continued to believe in myself and continue to work. I think going overseas was one of the worst decisions I ever made. I think if I would have stayed in the G League, I probably would have been back in the NBA and played 5 more years. But nonetheless, I left and I came to Europe, and I had an amazing time. I have no complaints about my time here. I had a great career here, and have enjoyed my life. So it's been great.
Well, so when you go overseas and head to Europe, once again, I can imagine, and just from what I know, the style of basketball in Europe is different than what it is in, America and the NBA and whatnot. So talk a bit about how your skill set fit in well in Europe.
It didn't fit in. I was an American player. I was a one-on-one pinch post, get the ball ISO at the elbow player. That was the game I was crafting, and I was good at it. And when I went to Europe, I didn't like the style. I didn't like what I had to do. I never liked it. I played in Europe for 8 years and more, and I never liked, because I'm a one-on-one player. I like space. I like the lane clear. I like to ISO against guys. I like to look guys in the eye when I'm on defense, and then they're on offense. I like to go at them back and forth, up and down the court. And the only time I really was able to do that was when I had stopped playing in the big EuroLeague teams and started playing the local teams, because then you can do what you want and bully the coaches and assert yourself. But when you're in EuroLeague, you can't do that. You play limited minutes, even if you're a superstar. The best players average 15 points. You're not running ISO after ISO after ISO. So, yeah, I didn't like the style at all. I
Yeah.
still don't like it.
No. So for you, as you're, kind of adopting and continuing in your career, I mean, what was it about basketball or playing the game, even if it wasn't necessarily at the style that you loved, but it kept you hungry to keep coming back and continue to play?
You mean as a pro or before?
Yeah, as a professional.
Well, I wanted to go back to the NBA, and I always thought that I could. That was always my goal. Every day when I went to the gym, I told myself I have to be the best player in practice today because I have to be the best player in the league because I have to be the best player in the continent because I have to go back to the NBA.
Yeah.
And that's why I kept working. That's why I went back to the gym every night. That's why I came to the gym in the morning. That's why I lifted more than anybody. That's what my goal was. It was the same goal I had since I was 10 years old, is to go to the NBA. So, I mean, really, I tried to go to the NBA for 20 years, since from the age of 10 to 30.
Yeah.
And I had a little sliver of time in the middle of those 2 decades where I was in the NBA. But really, I was on both sides, going into the NBA for 10 years trying to get in, and then I was out for 10 years trying to get back in.
Now, just from a mental standpoint, I know you mentioned, hey, I try not to listen to too many outside opinions, but you know, as you reach that pinnacle and then you're to your point, you're hearing all these negative things about you. How do you stay mentally strong? Is that just believing and knowing in your true heart that what they're saying isn't true? That's not the characteristic of me. Or how did you kind of handle the mental side of that?
Well, you got to earn the right to hold up two middle fingers to everybody. And
Yeah.
the only way you earn that right is to outwork everybody around you. So if I wasn't allowed to say, "Oh, these guys don't know about me. I'm better," I wasn't allowed to say I'm better than anybody unless I was in the gym more hours than them. That was it.
Yeah.
So if I'm in the gym at midnight and I've been here since 9 p.m., did rehab for an hour and a half, shooting. Now I'm laying in my own sweat, whatever it is, and there's nobody else has been there. Maybe Luol Deng has been there for 30 minutes. Maybe 2 nights later, Gennaro Pargo is there for an hour. You know, maybe 2 nights that week, James Johnson is there, but I'm there every night.
Yep.
If I'm there every night, it's the only reason I have the right to go home and look in the mirror and say they're wrong about me.
Yeah.
And that's it. Now, that doesn't guarantee that they are wrong about you, and it doesn't guarantee that you're better than anybody or that you're going to have success, but it gives me the right to believe in myself. And so for me, that's why I always had the right to say, I don't want to hear nothing you guys have to say about me. None of it's true. I'm out here working. So
I love that. And I think to your point, when you can look at yourself and say, hey, I know I've done everything that I can physically do to give myself the best opportunity, there's a sense of just maybe calmness that could come over you, opposed to the, man, I wish I would have done this, or what if I could have worked a little bit harder? Joe knows he put everything into this.
I think there's two sides to that. One is I get to take all that to my grave.
Yeah.
See, everyone, when they look at your basketball career, they want to talk about what's your favorite game, what's your favorite play, what's your favorite win, what's your favorite championship. I don't give a shit about any of that.
Yeah.
What I care about is I was in the gym by myself when no one else was around, listening to my favorite music, working on moves that I really wanted to get better at. And I didn't care. I didn't care about games. I didn't care about wins. I didn't care about none of that shit.
No.
Doesn't mean I didn't care about it at all. But my relationship to basketball was one of giving my hours and my attention and sacrificing the rest of my life for the game. So, um, you know, that was my life in basketball, was the invisible hours all alone that nobody else will ever know about except me recounting them. And then I don't even remember your question. I said there's another side to it, but
It's a perfect answer. Now for you on those workouts, did you have a personal trainer that you worked with? Did you have a team manager that would go in with you, or was that just truly unrequired Joe hours, just getting the work in?
well, I made a lot of mistakes with working out. So I should have taken more trainers. I should have listened. Once I got to the pros, I should have realized the guys I'm competing against have teams behind them, and I should have gone and assembled a team. But like in high school, for example, I was working out alone as a rule. So my rule was I have to work out 3 hours a day with a ball in my hand, outside of anything to do with anybody else. So team practice doesn't count. Working out with guys doesn't count. It's 3 hours alone. So if on top of that I have team practice, great. On top of that I have weight room. On top of that I have plyos, great. But I got to be by myself for 3 hours. And the reason is because you learn when you're going through the NBA grind as a teenager, and I say NBA, I mean like training to be an NBA player.
Yeah.
You learn that it's not just about hours; it's about the intensity of your negative emotions, like the amount of resentment that you can bring to the table, and the bitterness that you can bring to the table, and the explosive anger you can bring to the table, is what drives the development of your skills and your athleticism. Like take vertical jumping, for example. The reason I became such a great vertical leaper is not because I worked on my vertical a lot. It's because I worked on it while in an extremely intense and negative and bitter and resentful emotional state. And the only way to get there is to work out alone. It's to be isolated. Because when you work out with people, it becomes a bonding experience. It fills you with joy. It's like hugging, and you don't want to hug people. You want to be you want your life to be void of hugs. So the best way to do that is to work out by yourself. Um, so yeah, my workout regimen was mandatory isolation workouts alone. And in the NBA, I worked out a lot more with trainers, but I still always got my individual workout by myself. Like, for example, in the G League, no matter where we were staying or living or traveling, at 9 o'clock at night, I was somewhere with a basketball by myself in front of a reflection, a mirror, a weight room mirror, a storefront window outside on the street, inside an exit stairwell, dribbling up and down the stairs. At 9 o'clock at night, I was by myself doing my ball handling work. So, yeah, there you go.
I love it. Now, for you, I know you mentioned you've now retired and aren't playing. So talk a little bit about that decision. I feel like that's a hard thing to decide to do, regardless of, what someone's thinking about, but to, kind of close a chapter of a playing career and then moving on to the next chapter. Talk a little bit about that for you.
Well, I always planned that since I was a kid. I wanted to retire at the age of 35. I didn't want to play beyond 35. Uh, First of all, I wanted to feel a sense of urgency that I had to get this done before X date. Just
Yeah.
like going to the NBA, I knew I had to get it done before my fourth year of college, or I wasn't going to go. And similarly, I needed my career to have a cap on it, so I had a sense of urgency. And also, I always knew that my time in basketball was about personal growth and development. I'm not in love with basketball. I never have been. I think that's a very childish thing to pretend or to think. I love basketball. So I always knew it was about personal growth and development. And I always thought, what am I going to do with all this personal growth and development if I'm playing with a ball in a gym till I'm 45 years old? So I wanted to be finished playing when I was 35 and then take everything I had learned into a new life that could take me 10 years to get my feet wet in. And then 45, I'm ready to go. And I'm in my second life. So 35 was the day. That doesn't mean it was easy. It's been tough. It's been years. It's still tough. I still miss it. But it was planned 35, and I hit it. I retired 2 weeks before I was 35.
So talk about now, what Joe's working on and the different things you're doing today.
Wow. So I do quite a bit. So now I'm an entrepreneur. I run a lot of businesses. I run investment companies. I work in real estate. I work in medical clinics. I do a lot of consulting and advising. I write a lot, finishing up my book, which is called How to Make the NBA. So,
Yeah.
so I've been working on that for 4 years. I write between 3 to 6 hours a day. And other than that, I'm a daddy. And that's my number one joy. My number one joy and my number one job is being a father.
I love it. So talking through a couple of those different things, on the book writing side, one, do we have a potential release date that we can be looking for the book?
It's too long right now. It's 1,000 pages, and I got to hack it down. But I would love for it to come out tomorrow. But it could be 6 months. It could be 6 years. I would guess 2026 is when I'll release it. But I love it. I love the book as much as I loved, working my way through the basketball ranks. It's a book about how a kid who has absolutely no realistic shot at making the NBA makes it.
Yeah.
It's a prescription for exactly what to do step by step, what to think, how to work, how to behave, how to structure your life, how to feel, how to talk to yourself, how to talk to others, what to do in every nuance of your life. That's what the book is about. Because I wanted that book when I was a kid. That's all I wanted was someone to teach me how do I go to the NBA.
Yeah.
That's what. So,
So let me ask you this, over the course of your life, and once again, I know we talked about relationships and the role they played. But, was there anyone in your life that you'd say was like mentor for you in your playing career, that, really kind of helped give wisdom or, help you as you were navigating new territory and new waters?
Yeah, a lot of guys. I mean, I owe my success obviously not to just to my own work, but to other people in my life. The biggest stages of growth for me were Bob Huggins, Eric Martin, Larry Harrison, Billy Hahn. I think Eric Martin, when I got to West Virginia, taking me under his wing and empowering me with a pro mentality was one of the biggest periods of growth that I had. He was a big mentor for me.
Hmm.
He's a coach now at South Carolina State. He had just come off a playing career of his own in Europe, and he was the first guy to introduce me to pro mentality. He was
Yeah.
the first guy to strip away all the ideological amateur nonsense that you're bombarded with as a kid, when you're falling in love with the dream of playing in the NBA. And he was the one that made it real to me, told me how to actually do it, how to actually think, how to work out, how to be an asshole. He's the guy who taught me all that. He's number one. Bob Huggins is up there too.
Yeah.
He did a lot of those same things because he mentored Eric Martin. And then when I was in the NBA, Bill Peterson was our player development guy, and he's bounced around the league as a player development guy. He helped me a lot. Adrian Griffin as well. They worked with me when I was there for a short time. I don't know. Nancy Lieberman when I was in the G League, Casey Hill when I was in the G League. I could name 20 people, but I had a lot of help for sure. A lot of European coaches too. The most help I got was from guys who didn't tolerate my bullshit,
Hmm.
guys who I butted heads with, and they refused to back down. And they
Yeah.
said, "Look, it's my way or the highway, Joe. You're not as good as you think you are. In fact, you're a problem, and I don't want you on my team. So
Hmm.
get out." And those were the guys that helped me the most. I'm thinking, wow, I can't remember his name right now. Okay, so I had a coach in Turkey who kicked me off the team twice, didn't want me, worked me to death when I was 33 years old. And I'd never been worked so hard in my life, even since college. But I wish I had him as a coach since I was 21. Um, those are the guys that helped me the most. So
Now, I think it's always interesting because so many people will say similar things of, it's the person that challenged me the most that I respected the most, or it's the person that, was willing to, yeah, butt heads with me. Uh, and I think so frequently on the other side of it, you don't want to be that person that challenges someone, or you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. But the reality is to get the best out of people, you have to be direct, right? And you need to maybe push them or nudge them. So what would your, advice be to someone that's listening to this, whether they're a business professional, they're a player, they're a coach, and they're just trying to kind of balance that out of, I'm trying to maximize what I can get out of somebody, all the while, I don't want to tarnish the relationship.
well, the guys that I got the most out of, the coaches who helped me the most, I had no relationship with them when we
Hmm.
were in the moment. I hated them. If they had been worried about their relationship with me at the time, then they wouldn't have helped me at all. It's only looking back
Yeah.
that I love them, and that's across the board for all the coaches that I really love and value and respect now. At the time, I hated them, and that's a truth in pro basketball that most players don't admit later on. We talk about it in poker games behind closed doors. The biggest players from the biggest teams, I'm talking college and
Yeah.
the pros, that you read puff pieces about how they had great relationships with their coaches. They don't like their coaches. They hated them. It's only 5, 6, 10 years after the fact that they're like, yo, that guy loved me in a way that I needed at the time. So my advice to anybody who's in that coach role is if you are striving to be liked or trying to be liked, you're probably not helping the kid at all.
Love it. Well, I always think um, to the Bulls documentary, The Last Dance, when MJ's talking, he's like, I was just trying to, I had had success. I had had wins. I was pushing everyone else to be able to feel or, have what I had. And he goes, I didn't care. You could call me a tyrant. Right. And it's just like, yeah, his number one focus was to be winning and to have success that way. And he wanted to bring everyone else with him. But that had to mean sometimes, and yeah, that was not going to be someone that you actually liked as a human or as a friend at that moment in time.
Yeah, man. I mean, people speak about it like there's a hint of not liking these high achievers. Like the people around them at times didn't like them. No,
Yeah.
no, no. The people around them hate them.
Right.
They hate them. They go home and talk to their significant other. I hate that guy.
Yep.
And if I see him out, I'm fighting him. And it's yeah, that's the way it is. So
Now, something that I've found interesting in just some of the conversations that you've had is, how maybe unaware people in the States are of the opportunities to play internationally, right? There's only so many players that actually get drafted each year into the NBA, but then there's, many other leagues and opportunities internationally. So talk a little bit about that. And just, for certain people, hey, if maybe, being a top, we'll just say 80 player in the world isn't on your radar, there still is great opportunities to play internationally.
well, I would think that if you're top 80, that you're somewhat aware of the opportunities to play, and I would hope.
Yeah.
Um, I guess to those guys on the cusp, I would tell them, you better not look international because if you're on the cusp, you better try to get to the league
Yeah.
because it's 10 to 50 times the money and a much better lifestyle. But there are a lot of leagues around the world that pay a lot of money and have a great lifestyle, and um, you end up being gods on earth. Like, what more could you want than to play professional basketball? And you don't have to be 1/10 as good as an NBA player to play some of these leagues overseas. So yeah, man, get after it.
I love it. Well, Joe, as you're, now being a dad and, raising a next generation, what are some things that you really want to instill in your kids and how you raise them?
that's a, that's quite. I would be a long-winded answer. Um, I think I want to say like first and foremost, but there's so many things. Obviously, um, I really can't point to one. It's I want to say be a good person, but what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm working on manners with my daughter. Have good manners. That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want her to be a hard worker and to have good work ethic. I think one of the big ones is that I want her to understand reciprocity
Mm.
and to make sure that you're giving to people and being empathetic with taking and to not take more than you give.
Yeah.
To be that type of a person, I think, is important. And to be a person who aggressively and disgustingly defends things that are important to you.
Mm.
That's something I want to instill in my daughters. To not be just fickle and careless with the things that you claim you care about. Work hard for them and fight to defend them. Don't let people take them from you. Um, those are some good ones. Yeah, to develop your spiritual side, have a connection to a higher power than yourself. Um, and I think and the last one I'll mention is to plan, right? Be an aggressive planner, somebody who's always looking 10, 20, 30, 40 years ahead and parsing things out with that perspective in mind. So,
I love it. Well, Joe, I want to say thanks so much for being on today and just sharing your journey and some of the insights into how you've arrived with where you're at, and excited to continue to follow your journey. And we'll have to do this again for sure when the book releases so we can do a book launch and highlight all the amazing stories that you'll share there.
bro, this is a lot of fun. I appreciate the questions. I could tell you did your research, and man, I'm really grateful to be on. So thank you so much.